Very pumped up to have my good buddy Daniel Jeremiah here for episode 2 of the Helliepod. DJ, as I'm sure most of you are well aware, the lead draft analyst at NFL Network, replacing Mike Mayock, former NFL scout, former college quarterback. So there's a lot of stories there that we're going to get to. But first, DJ, I want to talk a little bit about the draft, if that's okay with you, since sure. I know you really haven't been doing much draft talk at all the last week or two.
Dude, this has been the craziest run up to a draft, man. Like, if you really think about it, you know, with what's going on in the world, like, this is the sports story, and it has been the sports story for, you know, over a month. Normally during this time of the year, you're talking about, you know, baseball's underway. We're talking about the NBA playoffs. And then, oh yeah, here comes the draft. And the draft ends up being a big event and it gets a lot of attention. But this is the only show in town right now. So we've had a huge buildup to this event, and it's going to be different with the way it's all set up. Everybody's going to be at home. But it's going to be fun, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be awesome. And you're right. It's the only show in town right now. It's going to be the most watched NFL draft, I think, in history. It's going to be fully virtual. There's not going to be any players walking across the stage. We have to social distance. No bro hugs from the commissioner. He's going to be in his basement. You guys are going to be broadcasting from home. There's going to be 58 prospects that are going to take part virtually as well. The NFL has sent these guys cameras and little draft kits full of gear and swag from the NFL sponsors. And the most interesting thing to me, DJ, and obviously what's going to affect you the most, is the fact that this is a joint broadcast with ESPN this year. It's going to be on ABC, ESPN, and NFL Network. One of my buddies asked me, he said, how's that going to work with all of you NFL Network guys? Isn't this kind of like the Jets and the Sharks on West Side Story? I mean, you're sleeping with the enemy here. I said, you know, it's really not. Daniel specifically knows all of these guys and gets along with them so well. So is this something you're looking forward to, DJ? Or when you heard about it, we're like, oh man, I kind of enjoyed our own broadcast.
I think it's mixed, because I love the people that we get to work with, not only on camera at NFL Network, but all of our producers that we've worked together. We all know the same guys, and they're great guys. And so there's a comfort level there, and I'm very proud of what we've been able to put on air before I got there and while I've been there. So on that side of it, you kind of bummed we can't have the whole group together. But the other side of it is it's going to be unique. It's a great opportunity for me, as you mentioned, to work with a bunch of buddies at ESPN. And it's very similar to scouting to me, because during my scouting career, people would be like, oh, you know, so you and like you work for the Ravens, so you and the Steelers scouts must hate each other. I'm like, nah, it's just some of my best friends. Like, we see each other on the road. We see each other in combines. It's a very tight-knit fraternity. So I've known Mel Kiper since I was in college. So I've known him for over 20 years.
Wow.
I've known Chris Mortensen longer than that. You know, and all those guys. I know Wingo and Booger. I worked with Louis Riddick with the Philadelphia Eagles. So, you know, Todd McShay's been a friend for a long time. So in some ways it feels, and I'm not putting myself in their company, but it feels like an all-star game where you're just kind of all in the same industry, all kind of coming together and joining forces.
I can't wait. It's going to be tremendous when things get started Thursday at 8:00. That's the first round. ESPN, NFL Network, and ABC all going to have coverage. Then Friday at 7 are going to be rounds 2 and 3. And then Saturday, starting at noon, we're going to see the middle and the end of the draft, rounds 4 through 7. What'd you think about Kevin Colbert's idea to extend the draft to 10 rounds, since he says that signing undrafted free agents is going to be a little bit more of a circus this year? Obviously not going to happen, but what did you think when you heard that proposal?
Well, I was laughing, first of all, because one of my buddies with the team, as a scout, had sent me this idea like a month ahead of time. It was like, if this thing that goes away, they're talking about it going, you know, when all this had just started, maybe a couple weeks before Kevin said it, he's like, they ought to extend it. So when Kevin went out there, he's like, dude, he's stealing my idea. Colbert stole my idea. So I was laughing, but I'm like, I don't think it's going to happen, just because it's too complicated to get it through the union and to agree on that. But it is going to be a little helter-skelter after the draft. So I think it would make sense, you know, logically, but I just think in terms of getting that approved and having the Players Association sign off on it would have been difficult, because really, if you're a player and you're an agent and your guy does not get picked in the first 7 rounds, I would rather have him get a chance to choose which team he goes to as a college free agent than to extend it, you know, to 12 rounds. And then he's going to get picked where it might not be as advantageous an opportunity to make the team. So, you know, a lot of times you'll hear guys say, you know, I know people want to say they were drafted, but you're better off being a free agent than a 7th round pick. Because a free agent, you get to choose them. They don't choose you, and you can kind of cherry pick the right opportunity.
Well, and that's not unique to this year. I think every year, if you're going to be a late round pick, probably more advantageous to be a free agent. You had a great quote earlier. I believe it was on one of the shows on NFL Network, or perhaps your podcast, Move the Sticks. If you don't listen to it, just a great treasure trove of information. But you called this a doubles draft.
Yeah.
You can't swing for the fences in this draft because there weren't pro days. You didn't get to really peel back all the layers of the onion in terms of scouting these prospects like you normally do. So you're not swinging for the fences. You just want to put somebody on base in scoring position and have a nice, solid draft. Do you think every team is going to be more risk averse, or is that just going to be certain general managers?
I think the majority of them are going to be risk averse. There's always going to be people out there who are going to look at that as an opportunity and say, man, we can get value, taking a little bit of a risk here because, if this guy had been able to go through the whole process and have a pro day and get a good medical, he would have gone higher. So there's some that might be a little more risky, but I think for the most part, the GMs that I talk to have said we're trying to eliminate the ifs. Well, if this guy can stay healthy, well, if this guy, can learn better than we think, if this guy can really run, I don't even know if this guy can really run. He's a corner. We don't have a 40 time on him. You're trying to eliminate as much of that as you can and just say, okay, these are guys, we have the information we need. We know that he's wired correctly. We know that he's healthy. We know that he can learn because he's, we've had a chance to visit with him at the combine. So those are the guys I think you're going to see elevated in this draft. And that's why, I use that word doubles, and that's straight from Ozzie Newsome. And he used to say that all the time, hey guys, it's okay to hit doubles. You can't strike out. So if you're going to go in the first round and you're swinging for the fences and you strike out, that's when you really set your organization behind, man. Those guys have got to be at least steady, solid starters. If not going to be superstars, that's okay.
And that's what's going into the mind of a team or several teams who perhaps could be drafting Tua Tagovailoa, right? This guy had an amazing career. And if it weren't for the injuries, of which there are many, both ankles, a hip, he broke his finger, reportedly broke his wrist twice as well. He sprained his knee. This is the best example to me, DJ, of a risk reward player, obviously the most polarizing player in the draft. And this is topic 1A and 1B, in the old sports page days, it's above the fold and it's below the fold. Who do you think's going to make a play for Tua, and do you think the Dolphins could just sit there at 5 and not move up and still land them?
Well, first of all, the fact that you did the newspaper analogy means that little patch of gray in your beard there's more where that came from. There's some coloring going on there with the newspaper reference. Look, to me, when I look for teams that make sense, I still go back to 5 and 6, and I'll give you the two reasons. So you're the Miami Dolphins. You trade Laramie Tunsil, who's a top 3 tackle. You trade Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's probably one of the 3 best free safeties in the league. So you've moved on from these assets to get picks. What are you getting picks for? So you can go back and get more tackles and more safeties and more guys that try and replace the great players that just left. No, you did all that because you want to go get the quarterback that's going to help turn your team around. And I think Tua has that type of ability. Obviously, there is some risk there with the medical, but that's why it makes sense for the Dolphins. And then right behind them at 6 with the Chargers, Phillip Rivers moves on. I know Anthony Lynn loves Tyrod Taylor, and he's going to give him an opportunity this year. That, to me, makes this even a better fit for Tua because you don't have to rush him. You can let him get 100% healthy, take your time. In a year where we're not going to have much of an offseason, it's going to be difficult for these rookies to get on the field anyway. So to me, that makes a lot of sense for them. And a team trying to get, kind of a face of the franchise type player in Southern California, he's going to be a name brand, and he creates some excitement around a bunch of other talented players they have on that roster. So those two teams, for me, still make a lot of sense, even in his present health situation.
Do the Dolphins take that risk? It's interesting. Chris Greer he was mentored by Bill Parcells, and Bill Parcells has this checklist for quarterbacks. Now, it's a little old-fashioned, I think, in this day and age because it might be outdated, but they have to have a good touchdown to interception ratio, complete 60% of their passes, start 30 games, win 23, graduate from college, be a 3-year starter. Is that a reason that perhaps he could be leaning towards taking Justin Herbert as opposed to Tua?
Yeah, I think there's some theory there. And you think about, Mike Tannenbaum has been the biggest Justin Herbert supporter there is. Tannenbaum obviously connected with the Dolphins organization, connected to Bill Parcells, connected to Chris Greer. So there's, that's a theory that's kind of floating around out there, is that connection with Justin Herbert. But I also think when you're talking about 3-year starters now, that particularly, that part of that equation for Coach Parcells, it's a different year. It's a different era. It's just totally different now. These guys all come out after 3 years. We've seen, for instance, the last 2 first overall picks, and it's going to be 3 in a row with Joe Burrow. We're going to have 3 quarterbacks in a row that were transfers. Didn't even make it at their first stop. Had to go somewhere else. Kyler Murray, 1-year starter, first overall pick, rookie of the year. So I just think it's a different era in that regard. So I think some of that checklist has to be altered. But if you're going back, I've said this with Justin Herbert. I like Justin Herbert. I don't love him. But if you went back 15 years ago, that's the guy that everybody's looking for, right? The big, strong pocket passer who's actually an underrated athlete, but somebody that kind of cuts the image of the quarterback, who's been, played 4 years in college and won football games, high character, highly intelligent. He checks a lot of those boxes. But, from a playmaking standpoint, there's just a little something missing there.
So you would go Tua if you were the Dolphins?
I would, and I don't know if you know this, but I do not have a medical staff here at the Move the Sticks offices. So I do not have a doctor to rely on to give me a good medical info. But assuming that the doctors are okay with it, I think he's just a better football player.
Do you think the Dolphins can sit tight at 5, or do you think they have to move up because perhaps the Chargers could try to leapfrog them, which would take a handful of second-round picks? If history is any indication there, I guess the comp is the Darnold trade in 2018 when the Jets moved from 6 to 3 and they gave up those 3 additional second rounders.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. I've been kind of changing my tune on this as we come down the home stretch. I thought for a long time, man, it makes sense for the Chargers and the Dolphins to kind of have a contest there of who can get up to 3. And I do know Detroit wants out of 3. But I think both teams have a comfort level with both quarterbacks. So when you're in that situation, you're saying, okay, if we're comfortable with Tua, we're comfortable with Herbert, we're going to get one of them. So I'm not going to trade assets that we need to fill in the rest of our roster to go up there and get a quarterback who's coming off of a hip injury, or a quarterback who maybe isn't the perfect player in Justin Herbert. So I think both those teams stick and pick. I don't think we're going to see a trade up.
I'm just so fascinated by where Tua is going to end up, because I don't know what's riskier for the Dolphins. I don't know if it's riskier for them to draft Tua or riskier for them to pass Tua. We saw last quarterback they passed on because of injury, obviously Drew Brees, and we saw how that changed the face of the National Football League. That's going to be the question that's going to be answered early in the draft. And I can see being comfortable with both guys, but if I'm drafting my franchise quarterback in the top 5 or the top 6, I want to love the guy that I'm getting. And
there's something to that.
The other question I have in terms of quarterbacks, and then I'll move off that, but that seems to be we're so obsessive compulsive when it comes to quarterbacks in the draft. Jacksonville at 9 and the Raiders at 12. Do you think that one of those teams could make a surprise quarterback pick when they basically stated publicly they won't? Obviously, the Raiders have Mariota as a backup now, and the Jags seemingly set at quarterback.
Well, I mean, I can tell you, I don't think Jacksonville will, but I don't have to go too far back in history to tell the story about how David Caldwell, their GM, who's been a friend of mine since we were scouting, the West Coast together back in the early 2000s. I've known him for, 17 years. And prior to the Blake Bortles draft, we had talked, just about every week. We talked about all kinds of players. We never talked about Blake Bortles. So that came out of left field when they took.
And that's Blake. Your guy.
That's my guy. So I kind of told the story on a couple shows the day after the draft, because we were talking the night before the draft, and I was asking him about different players. We're kind of going through it. And I finally got to Blake Bortles, and I thought Bortles was going to go in the 20s. So maybe it was a trade up, trade back into the bottom of the first round type situation. So I said, what do you think on Bortles? And he goes, hold on, DJ. I got to take this call, man. I got to go. So he bails on the phone call. So I called him the day after the draft, before night 2. And I said, dude, was there anybody on the other line? He's like, no, man, I didn't want to lie to you. So I had to just get out of there. So he never said anything about it.
That's amazing.
So I think they really like Minshew. I think they're going to give him more opportunity here in this coming season. But, so I don't expect them to do it. The Raiders, I'll give you a scenario where I could see it with the Raiders. I don't I don't see them taking Jordan Love. So the guy would be Herbert if Herbert were to be there, say, when they pick at 12. Okay. I don't think they would trade up for him, but if he got to 12, I could see that happening. And the way that could happen is it would go like this. You would have Tua go 5 to the Dolphins, okay? So then it turns out, maybe the Chargers are a little bit higher on Tua than Herbert, and they have another option, which is they can take Isaiah Simmons, the talented safety / linebacker from Clemson, who's going to be a great fit with Derwin James with all that speed and athleticism to deal with Pat Mahomes and what you have to deal with the Chiefs in the AFC West. So they could go Simmons, then maybe they circle back for somebody like a Jalen Hurts in the second round is kind of the quarterback option. But if they do that, then I don't think there's anybody that's going to take a quarterback between the Chargers and the Raiders at 12, which if Herbert were there at 12, I would think the Raiders, even with Carr and Mariota, there'd be some thought there to take him. So that would be a fascinating scenario.
The Raiders, Dolphins, Jags, 49ers, and Vikings, all with 2 first-round picks. That's 5 teams. I don't remember the last time that has come into play. Out of those teams, which one do you feel like has the most pressure to improve in this draft?
Well, it sounds crazy because they're the best of those teams, but I'll say the Niners because, they are a whisker away from a trophy. They were right there. They had that game. And one of the fascinating things to me is that game turned on the one play, 3rd and 15. And as much attention as we give to Mahomes, which he's incredible, taking a 9-step drop from the shotgun, which I've never seen before in my life, throwing that ball to Tyreek Hill. But Tyreek Hill's speed is what made that happen. There's 10 yards of separation. His speed changed the game on the biggest play of the game. And on that sideline, watching the ring get removed from his finger was Kyle Shanahan. And now you're picking at 13, and Henry Ruggs from Alabama is out there, and you can get your own version of Tyreek Hill. That would be fascinating to me to give them some more firepower offensively. I wouldn't be surprised if they came back later in the first round and doubled up on offense. Maybe even a guy like Cole Kmet, and you have Cole Kmet. You have packages of Cole Kmet. You have your big-time tight end and Kittle. You have Juszczyk, the fullback. So now you can just maul people in the run game, and then you can put the speed out there and run by people. So I just think there's pressure on them to be this close to a championship to put the finishing touches on that roster.
Yeah, I can see some pressure on the Vikings too. In turn, that's probably the second best team on that list. And Rick Spielman, he's drafted well. He's drafted 16 Pro Bowlers in 14 years, but in year 3 of Kirk Cousins, you've gone 8-7-1, you've gone 10-6. He signs that contract extension. They lose some pieces on defense. There's a championship window there in my mind, DJ, that 2 to 3 years. You got to those windows don't stay open as long as you think they do. You remember the Seahawks? We thought that would be there forever, but it wasn't.
No doubt. To me, it's kind of a strike now time for them. And they extended Kirk, so they wanted Kirk to get him going. So. I just think when you've invested in the future there with Kirk Cousins that you're going to go ahead and try and get him some more help offensively with Diggs gone. I think they're going to go corner. I think they're going to get a corner and a wide receiver in the first round. It's just going to come down to which order that they go. And we'll see when that run on wideouts happens. But, they're right there, man. They are right there. And to me, when they re-signed Kirk Cousins, it said, okay, we're going to try and make this push right here.
You sounded like Bruce Allen there for a minute, calling him Kurt instead of Kurt.
I know. I don't know where Kurt came from. I actually called Rhett. This is the sign that I'm not getting much sleep. I called Rhett Lewis, our buddy, on Path to the Draft. Sure. I didn't believe it. I called him Brett, and I didn't even hear it. And then we finished the show, and I get a call from Ryan Yunt, our producer. He goes, "You realize you called Rhett Brett?" I didn't call him Brett. Why would I call him Brett? He sends me the link. I watch it. Sure enough, yeah, I breaded him. I definitely breaded him.
Hey, it happens. I can't tell you how many times something has rolled off my tongue, and then at the end of the segment during the commercial, a producer said the same thing, and I'm like,
there's no way I said that. What are you talking about? Yeah.
Happens all the time, dude. Come on. Hey, the deepest wide receiver draft ever? How many guys do you have with graded in the top 3 rounds?
Sure. I can tell you right now in the top 100 this year. So if you figure there's 96 picks in the top 3 rounds, something like that.
Yeah.
I have 18 of my top 100 players are wide receivers. To give you context on that, on average over the last 5 years, 8 receivers go in the top 100 picks. Last year, which was an unbelievable year, we had 13 wide receivers go in the top 100. Now, I don't think all 18 of these guys are going to come off the board in the top 100 picks, but they're worth top 100 picks. So that speaks to the depth that we have.
That's incredible. And you think that run on receivers is going to start maybe in that 11, 12 range with the Jets and the Raiders?
It's wide receiver row. Like I've been asked, people that are Niners fans, that are Denver Bronco fans, and you hear it from Eagles fans. Like, is the fourth receiver going to be there? We're going to be able to get one of those top 4 receivers? And I'm like, I'll tell you after pick 11, because if the Jets take one, then you could be looking at Jets, Raiders, Niners, Broncos, like, boom, they're gone. So that's why it's going to be fascinating. And then if the Jets take a tackle, then all of a sudden you feel a little bit better about at least one of those guys kind of falling down.
Well, and the Giants could take it. I mean, there's a lot of talented tackles in this draft too. I mean, you're going to see probably 4 of those guys go in the top 12 or so. Yeah,
we're going to see the tackle run early. Then it's going to be followed by the wide receiver run. And then I think once we get into the back end of the first round, I think you might see a run on corners. So it's funny how that it kind of all clumps together when you have teams with similar needs picking right by each other.
Give me some skinny here. Give me something you've heard from a team about a player or a strategy in the last couple of days that surprised you.
Well, this isn't from the team directly, but there's, some theories going around when talking to different teams. And I bought into this one a little bit. I thought it made sense, which was Tampa. I've been saying Tampa makes sense for the tackle, right? Go get another tackle to help protect Tom Brady. And then somebody brought up a great point to me. It's like, Tom Brady's been doing this for 20 years. What has he always had? He's always had a premier slot receiver. So even as good as they are with Godwin and with Mike Evans, and I know Godwin has played in the slot some, that he's been productive in there, but to go get Justin Jefferson, who's the best slot receiver in this draft, he's outstanding, and give Brady that little insurance policy in the middle of the field to go with the tight ends that they have, and then have Evans on one side, Godwin on the other. You talk about making your Hall of Fame quarterback comfortable. That would be fun to watch. I've been kind of advocating for them maybe in the second round to get a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the running back from LSU, to give them that pass-catching back. But I think they need at least a combination, right? You got to either have that back or that slot receiver that's going to be able to be his check down guy. It's going to be a quick, easy completions for him. That's just the way he's played the game for so long. I think you have to have that guy on this roster, and they don't.
But can that guy be a rookie?
I think this kid's polished, man. Justin Jefferson can do it. Yeah, he wore people out in the slot at LSU. Catches everything. He's great on third down, great in the red zone. He had Jerry Sullivan that coached him down there, or helped him down there. And Jerry's been around the NFL game for a long, long time. He really vouches for this kid. So now I think he can do it as a rookie.
Defensively, you have Chase Young as your number 1 player in the draft, period, regardless of what side of the ball you play on. And you do believe this is a no-brainer for the Redskins at number 2. You take Chase Young, who, by the way, is the hometown kid, and you just pencil in 6 or 7 Pro Bowls.
Yeah, I don't trade off of franchise quarterbacks, and I don't trade off of franchise edge rushers. I mean, it's the second most important position in football. Most important is the guy that throws it. The second most important is the guy that can hit him. And this guy's elite at that. And I don't think those guys come around all the time. And you also look at the track record, what Ohio State's put out on the D-line and how well those guys have played. Yep. We look at the Bosa boys, and this kid's he's special. So I don't care what they're offering me. I'm not trading off that pick.
Last 4 edge rushers or defensive ends at number 2: Von Miller, Chris Long, Julius Peppers, LeVar Arrington. So that's a pretty strong list.
Yep, that's a really strong list.
And by the way, the Redskins haven't drafted a first-team All-Pro player since 1999, so they could take that guy and get out of town. Wow, that's crazy.
Hold on. Let me get I'll take you behind the scenes here. So this is what I do for teams. So when we're like on the clock, if you can kind of see it here.
Oh, it's your little board.
Yeah, I just create a little board, so I don't have to be thumbing through a bunch of notes here. So like for the Redskins, that's a good nugget. That's a Helly contribution. I'm gonna fact check it. Don't get me wrong. I don't fully trust it. But you're gonna give me one more time on that?
As you should. The Redskins have not drafted a first-team All-Pro player since 1999. You know what? I just might watch the entire draft from start to finish and not even take a coffee, beer, or pee break just to see if you use that nugget.
Oh, it's going to get – I just wrote it down. It's in here. Yeah.
I love it. So we talked about this last week. that board relatively similar, obviously not identical, to one that you would use to call a game.
Yeah, and this is one of the cool things, and I would give free unsolicited advice here to anybody that's in a new profession or in a new role. So last year was my first year as kind of the lead guy after Mayock took the Raiders gig. So I've always, kind of done it one way in terms of I would have all my notes are in my computer. Mayock was a paper guy. I had everything in my computer, which you kind of expect. It's a generational thing. Mike's old. But then I would have my team stuff would be in like a packet, right? So I would have 32 pages, 1 page for each team. Well, and you could kind of put it in order in the first round of when they pick, but then trades happen and then this team's on the clock. You can't be on TV trying to thumb through your packet to find the team and what they do. And so after the draft was over, I wrote down, and Jerry Madeline actually gave me this idea, who works with the talent at the network. Jerry. He
Sure.
said, write notes of stuff that you would like to do differently next year. So right after the draft, I wrote down one of the things, like I've got to figure out a better way to access my team information. I have all my player stuff in my computer. That's easy, but the team stuff's difficult. And so I started thinking, well, I call these Charger games and you have everything on, 53 players on each side on one board. So why don't I just create a kind of a smaller board with all the teams? I mean, you just put the NFC on one side by division and the AFC on the other. And then when there's a trade, the most movement I'll have to do on the desk is just flip the card over.
Brilliant. See, you're always learning, man.
It just shows how dumb I am that I didn't think of it ahead of time. That's all that is.
Hey, I have to ask you, you got the box that Viore sent you with all that gear?
I did. I'm stoked because not only do I love the clothes, but the shorts, I run in them, but they also double as my swim trunks. So they dual purpose, high quality. I appreciate that.
I love them because I can sleep in them and then I can roll out of bed, walk my puppy in the morning, and then wear them the rest of the day. And there's not many things you can wear to bed and wear the entire day.
Yeah.
Viore shorts are one of them. The shorts are unbelievable. The shirts are fantastic. I've been wearing their gear, DJ, as you know, for a long time. And all of you out there listening or watching this can wear their gear too and get 20% off. Just go to VioreClothing.com/helipad. That's VUORI clothing.com/helipod. Crazy soft material. Some of the best joggers that I own. I love their hoodies. I'm wearing one of them now. It's not too thick. It's not too thin. It's just right. VioreClothing.com/helipod. Check it out now. I promise. I'm kind of a gear hound. DJ, I know you are as well. So I was pumped to hear that you enjoyed the clothing as much as I do.
No, it's fantastic. I appreciate you sending that my way. It'll get used. I guarantee it.
Of course. All right. I want to ask you a couple more draft questions. Then we want to get to know DJ a little bit, and then we're going to let you run. I really appreciate the time. Let me ask you about two guys. I called their games, and they were the best players on the field when I did their games.
Okay.
Harrison Bryant, I think, is the best tight end in the draft. A 0-star recruit coming out of Georgia, and then he turns into the Mackey Award winner, has over 1,000 receiving yards. What do you think about Harrison Bryant out of FAU?
Very explosive. I thought he played even faster than he tested. I want to say he ran in like the mid 4.7s, but he plays faster than that. He's a little bit undersized, but he's a competitive blocker. So he needs to get a little bit stronger, but in scouting, we kind of look and see, does this guy want to do it? Is he willing to do it? We can work with him, get stronger, teach him on the technique side of things. But you're drafting him, to my opinion, to stretch the field. That's what he does best. That offense, you saw him get a chance. They ran a bunch of those like fake bubble screens. He kind of stalk blocks for a count, and then he'll release up the seam, and he's really good after the catch. So he's I can pull it up right now. He's my third tight end. So I have him behind Cole Kmet and Adam Troutman. Kmet from Notre Dame and Troutman from Dayton. They're just bigger. There's bigger guys that can play more as inline wide tight ends. I think this kid's, at least initially, you're going to play him flexed out or off the ball until he just gets a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger.
Yeah, 6'5". They list him, I think, at 241, 242. Yeah. When I saw him, I think he played closer to 230.
Yeah, I think at the combine, the story I was told was that he weighed in about 243 and he ran at about 235 because he ran a couple days later. He got that water in him, though. He got that water in him right before the weigh-in.
It's amazing guys can fluctuate that much. I mean, there are guys that lose 10, 12 pounds, after playing in a game. Another guy I loved this guy, Jordyn Brooks, the linebacker for Texas Tech. Yeah. All he does is make tackles, And boy, does he move out there on the field. He just gets to the ball with a quickness. I know he's behind guys like Patrick Queen and Kenneth Murray, but I love Jordyn Brooks.
Jordyn Brooks, so I'm looking at it right now. So he just missed my top 50. So he's the first linebacker for me outside the top 50. I think he's my 51st or 52nd player in the draft. He's got a chance to go in the first round. It would not shock me at all if a team like Green Bay in the bottom of the first round who has a need at linebacker looked at Jordyn Brooks. He's going to go early in the second round. You mentioned the speed, Dan. Like it is sideline to sideline range. They play him actually in the deep middle of the field sometimes, almost like he's a free safety. And he can just run all over the place. He's a great hitter. He's going to need a little bit of time just in terms of being able to we can talk about being able to key plays, sort and fill. That's going to just take a little bit of time. The Big 12 is so wide open. As you know, you didn't get a chance to do as much of that. So
right.
At the end of the day, it's a passing league, and you need linebackers that can run and cover, and this kid can do that.
Yeah, I think he'd be a great fit with the Rams. The Cowboys could use a player like him. I think anybody could use a player like him. All right, DJ. Let's get to know DJ a little bit here. All-state quarterback in San Diego. We talk about rookie years on the Helliepod here, and you've had seemingly 100 different rookie years. You start your college career at Northeastern Louisiana, and then you move on to App State. Let's start with Northeastern Louisiana. How did you end up there?
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy story. So grew up in San Diego, threw for a zillion yards, but it was just a little bit smaller school and kind of fell through the recruiting cracks. And then the San Diego Union Tribune at the time wrote an article about me as the county's all-time leading passer, but the signing day had come and gone. I hadn't signed with anybody. So they kind of wrote like, it's kind of weird this kid hasn't signed on, blah, blah, blah. Well, the Chargers at the time had a defensive coordinator named Bill Arnsparger.
Sure. And
if the name sounds familiar, it's because he was a defensive coordinator of the 72 Dolphins, the only undefeated team. So he's been kind of a legend. He was with the Chargers at that time. Well, his son, David Arnsparger, was a receiver coach at Northeast Louisiana. So he reads this article, tells his son, there's some quarterback out here supposed to be pretty good that hasn't gone anywhere. You need one? Yeah, we do. So they start recruiting me. And so it after signing day, I ended up getting offers, from Akron, I think it was Montana, a couple different other schools. So Western Illinois was one of them at one point in time. But that was where I ended up visiting. And when I went there on the visit, they go, okay, yeah, we're a Division I team. We're going to play 4 SEC teams almost every year. They're independent. There's no league. So you're going to get a chance to play in some of the best venues in college football. Like they don't tell you you're the money game. Like they left that part out. But nonetheless, I was like, yeah, this is great. I get to play at, Auburn and Arkansas and Kentucky and Mississippi State, like all these places. This is going to be fun. So yeah, that's how I ended up going out there. And they sold me on the fact that they chucked the ball. They had Stan Humphries had played there, gone on to play for the Chargers. Bubby Brister,
yeah,
had played there and went on to play for the Steelers and everybody he played for. And then Doug Peterson, who's the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, had played there. So they've had 3 NFL quarterbacks come out of this kind of obscure Division I school. So they sold me, and it was either go freeze my butt off in Akron, Ohio, or go deal with the mosquitoes in Louisiana, and I chose the mosquitoes.
So you started there, and then you end up transferring to App State. How did that come to fruition?
Yeah, so I redshirt at Northeast Louisiana for a year. Then I start my second year. I think I started like the last 7 or 8 games. But it was so dispiriting because we were independent. So there's nothing to play for. You have no conference championship to play for. We went 5-7 that year. We beat, Central Florida with Dante Culpepper. We beat Hawaii. We got Tim Couch handed us our lunch in the Kentucky game. I can promise you that. But anyways, we go 5-7, and I'm like, what do you play for here? And so it just wasn't. I didn't feel great about the fit, and it just wasn't the right spot. So I decided I was going to transfer, and at that point in time, I took my tape, from some like 2 or 3 of my games. My dad actually helped me out with this, and he sent them to. He printed out the USA Today. Had the top 25 for 1AA, which it was called at that time.
Right.
And I knew I could transfer and be eligible right away because I didn't really want to sit out. So we sent that video to all 25 teams. And I heard back from the majority of them and got offered by several of them. And they ended up coming down to, at that time, which was App State. It was Western Illinois then. That's where they came in. And then the other one was Montana. So those are the 3 schools I was going to look at. And I went and visited App State, and I just absolutely fell in love with it up there. Had a history of winning. just good, tough, hard-nosed football. And I love the mountains of North Carolina. It was just beautiful up there. So it sold me.
That's a pretty area right there around Boone. And so you were more of at App State, you were more of an athletic quarterback.
Yeah, we threw it at Northeast Louisiana a bunch, and then App State was like G-load option. Like our coach, who's in the College Football Hall of Fame, Jerry Moore, had come from Nebraska under Tom Osborne. So it was, dude, you're running option. I remember getting up there, and I get up there. We go through the first fall, so I kind of knew what we were running at that point in time because I had played, and I knew we ran the football a lot. But we get to spring practice, and I go into the locker room for the first day of spring. And I go to the equipment guy. I go, hey, Willie T, who's our equipment guy. I go, Willie T, you made a mistake, man. My red jersey's not hanging in my locker. You got like a white one there. And I got to get where's my red jersey? He goes, oh no, quarterbacks are live here in the spring. I go, what? What?
Little different.
Yeah. It's like, no, yeah, you're going to run the ball. Like you're getting hit. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I didn't even gear myself up for that.
That's crazy. Wow. Well, you had a fine career at App State, and then you got out and you were trying to figure out what you were going to do. And Chris Mortensen had a relationship with your father, right? They knew each other, and
Yep.
he helped you. Was it an internship or a job at ESPN?
Yeah, so I'll give you the backstory there. The Super Bowl was in San Diego. I think it was 1997. So this was the Elway win over the Packers, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So Chris Mortensen, I listened to my dad on the radio, and over the years, my dad's a pastor. He has a national radio ministry. And so it was 2-week period, right, between the championship game and the Super Bowl. So Chris Mortensen was out in San Diego for a long time. So he goes to my dad's church. He comes up after the service, introduces himself to my father. My dad obviously knew who he was. I had been in church that day, but I didn't know any of this was going on. So I just come back up to the house for Sunday lunch, and Chris Mortensen's sitting at the table. And I'm like, what the heck's he doing here? I know who he is. My dad invited him up for lunch. And so
That's awesome.
we just kind of hit it off. And I told him I was in college at the time. And I told him, I've been interested in broadcasting. And so he took note of that. And then, so going into my senior year, he said, hey, would you like to work on the Orange Bowl, which was the national championship game that year, as basically a gopher, And I said, yeah, absolutely. He goes, well, I'll put you in touch with this guy named Jay Rothman, who's going to produce the game. So Jay calls me, and he couldn't have been nicer, and said, hey, I can't pay for your flight here. I can't put you up in a hotel, but if you can get down to Miami for the week, I'll put you to work. I said, okay. So I paid for my flight down there. I stayed with one of my college teammates, Wayne Smith. So I stayed at his house, and then I went over to the Orange Bowl, and I literally went and got people sandwiches. That's what I did. Like I just went and had to go to Publix, to the Publix store where they had sandwiches, and I was a gopher for the whole week.
I've been there.
So I loved it. People be like, oh, that's the work. I'm like, you kidding me? Like I'd walk in and out of the stadium and get a chance to do whatever they wanted me to do. I had a blast. I think I was in the truck during the game, so I got to see how everything worked behind the scenes. So I didn't think anything of that. I thought it was a one-off experience. I'll put it on my resume. We'll see what happens.
Sure.
And then the next year, I graduate in December, and I just go work with my dad. I have no job, so I work with my dad that following December.
What are you doing with your dad?
So I was working in the warehouse. So he has, this national ministry. He's written, over 100 books, has all of his audio tapes at this time. So I was in the warehouse packaging up orders that people had sent in for with books and tapes and CDs. I'd package them up and get them sent out. So it was like not something I really envisioned I was going to be doing with my life at that point in time. But that's what it was. So then we go from December all the way to that summer, the following year. And I guess this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to work for my dad. I don't know what else I'm going to do. And then I get a call out of the blue that summer from Jay Rothman. And he says, hey, I just got hired to go from the college side to the NFL side. I'm going to be the new producer of Sunday Night Football. And I want to know if you want to be on my crew. And I was like, yes. I didn't even know what I was going to do. I didn't even know what I was going to do. I'm like, yes, I want to do it. So I was a spotter in the booth, which is basically just telling people who made the tackle, who missed the tackle, just kind of an extra set of eyes up there. I did that for 2 years. And I also, in order to give me some more money, they made me the E&G producer, which is basically I'm in charge of getting the scenics shot. So if folks are watching an NFL game and you're watching a night game and you see the shot of the skyline, this town all live, that's all shot the day or two before at the same time, and they roll them in the game. So I know nothing about anything to do with this, but they're like, these two camera guys have been doing this for years. Basically, you just got to call the locations and make sure they can get in the door. That's all you have to do. So I had a Frommer's. Remember those?
Oh, of course. Like the travel guides?
Yes. So I would look it up. Okay, we have the St. Louis this week. So I would look it up and go, okay, we need to go shoot the arch. They have this Fitz's Root Beer Factory, looks kind of cool. So I'd call them, make sure we could go in there and shoot. I think BB King had a place there. Let's go shoot there. So I would just make these phone calls and do that kind of stuff. I had no idea what I was doing.
Hit all the 5 most popular spots in each town.
Yeah, that's it.
You a good spotter, DJ, because we've done games together.
Yeah.
Depending on the level of game, certain games, mostly NFL games and big college games, you can travel a spotter. You can hire your own guy and bring him to the game. Some of the lower level games, you'll get assigned a spotter who could be somebody that works for the athletic department. Let's say at San Diego State or Idaho State. And the spotter is crucial, especially to the play-by-play guy calling the game. Were you a good spotter or were you a crappy spotter?
Neither. I was an unbelievable spotter. So this is the difference, though. You're talking about the traditional spotter role, and you have them in these games for the guys calling the game. They created a whole new role for me on this broadcast, which I believe ESPN still has somebody that does this, but at the time nobody was doing this. I was a spotter for the cameraman, the director, and the producer. Oh. So I was on a channel with the cameraman, so I could tell them who made the tackle, missed the tackle, who blew the coverage.
Okay.
You could understand the game a little bit. So then when the announcer had said something, I was trying to see the same things Joe Theismann would be seeing. Right. So then the cameras could be caught up so they wouldn't be chasing everything all over the place. And they could also they could get in Mike Patrick's ear if I had said something about, they only had 10 guys on the field or something like that, then they might, tell him that in his ear. So you had the spotter that was just working with Mike, and then I was working with the director and the cameraman.
Okay. All right.
I can tell you one quick story on that, though, Dan.
Yeah, give it to me.
So the camera guys are great on these broadcasts. They've been doing it forever. And they ended up being like good buddies of mine through this process. And we would go shoot these scenics, and we would have a bunch of, raw footage that we're and package these things up. So we're in Nashville, and the waterway there, right?
Sure.
We're shooting some stuff there. And so I'm bored. I'm directing these guys. They're going to shoot whatever they're going to shoot. I'm just riding along in the car. So I was taking rocks and just like throwing them, and they would go into the water, right? Just throwing rocks and literally bored out of my mind. So the camera guys, they would start editing and making spoof videos of me that right before the game started, they would put on return so we could watch it. And it was like DJ's career, and they followed the rock, like going up in the air and then coming off all the way down into the water, making a big splash. So that was the first thing that started. Then we started figuring out, I got to figure out a way where I can sneak myself into all these scenic shots. Like if we're shooting the sidewalk in New York City, I would be walking down the sidewalk in between the crowds. So it became a running joke of like, where could you find me, that I would planted myself in all these scenic shots.
Got to keep it fun, man. It's the stuff like that where somebody will say, hey man, work this word into a broadcast tonight. Oh, yeah. Work it into a game. We've all done that at one time or another. I love that. So you do that for a year or two?
2 years. Yeah. I did it for 2 years.
You do it for 2 years. And then you get the opportunity to move into scouting.
Yeah, I was doing a Ravens game and was up in the booth. One of the other chores with this job is I had to identify the booth. So if you're watching a game and you see him, we're going to talk about Jerry Jones, and then boom, cut to the owner's box. Well, you might know where Jerry Jones is going to sit at a Dallas Cowboy home game.
Sure.
But to find him quickly with a camera on a road game, you have to cheat. So you find out what box he was going to be in. I'd take a piece of paper and I would write like OW, or like, no, I would write VO, visiting owner. And I would take that little piece of paper and I would tape it right underneath their booth so the cameras could then just go quickly sort around the stadium, find VO, and then show Jerry Jones. So I was there early up in the press box trying to find my way to get all the signs where I needed them. and I ran into a guy named TJ Mccray, who was a scout with the Baltimore Ravens, and he was actually my brother's college roommate. My brother played at Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, and this was his college roommate, and he was scouting for the Ravens. So we struck up a conversation. He introduced me to Phil Savage, who was there with the Ravens, who was the director of player personnel, and they asked if I had ever thought about scouting. I'm not in a million years. Never, don't know what they do. Never thought about it. Nothing. But they kind of explained what you do, and I'm like, okay, this sounds kind of fun. So yeah, I'm interested. So we go through that season. The season ends, and they call. I think Phil Savage called me and said, "Hey, would you like to volunteer and help us at the combine?" Kind of like it just as an audition. So I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to be doing, but sure. So they flew me to Indianapolis. They put me up in a hotel, which that's already a win over my first professional experience. And then my job this week, instead of going and getting sandwiches, my job was to stock the interview room where they interviewed the players with snacks. And my second job was to save seats for the weigh-in, which is like the weigh-in might start at 7. You'd have to be there at 5 a.m. to save seats for your 5 or 6 personnel guys. So that's what I did for a whole week. I saved seats, I got snacks. And then following that, a couple months later, they called me back and said, "Hey, would you like to come out and interview for a job?" So I flew back out there, interviewed for a job, and ended up getting it. But it's kind of like, I think a lot of people have that similar story, no matter what industry you're in, is that people don't want you to show them you can do the important things. They want to say, is this guy willing to do all the cruddy stuff that nobody wants to do? And then once you do that, it shows that you care a little bit. And that's what kind of opened up all the doors.
It's amazing too. I think all the people who are maybe unfamiliar with what a scout really does and what that life is really like would be surprised to hear how much you're on the road and how unglamorous the life of especially an entry level NFL scout is. Do you know off the top of your head how many miles you logged in those first couple of years?
Oh gosh, it was unbelievable. I mean, I had so many times where I would drive straight home from Boise, which would be like 14, 15 hours. I remember getting up, I went to a BYU night game, and I just wanted to get home. I missed my family. I've been gone for 10 days or 2 weeks. So the game would end at 10 o'clock at night, and I'd get in my car and drive 12 hours to get home. But you were gone, over 150 nights a year, maybe closer to 200. It's brutal. It was a tough life.
You work for the Ravens, you work for the Browns, you work for the Eagles. I believe it was when you were with the Browns that everybody got let go.
Yep.
And is that's when you started that Move the Sticks Twitter handle, and the idea of moving into media kind of blossomed? Yeah,
because I had left ESPN to go into scouting because I didn't really envision myself being behind the camera, being a producer, sitting in a truck. Like that was the path I was on, and that really wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. So that's why I went into the scouting thing. Always, I had some interest in being on camera, but I would have had to go, small market and work my way up as a host or a sports guy.
You would have had to do what everybody else does. All the schmoes like me.
I would have had to do the heli work. I did not want to do the heli work. So that just that's not going to happen. Well, get let go by Cleveland. I still have 18 months left of my contract. They owed me money. So I'm like, well, I'm going to get paid for the next 18 months. I got offered a job with another team. I turned it down because I had to offset my contract that I had to work for free, basically. I'm going to get paid the same whether I work or I don't work. And so during this time, I had a conversation with Chris Mortensen, and he said, you know what, you ought to start a Twitter page. And I'm like, that's great. What is Twitter? Like, I don't even know what this is. This is like 2009, I believe, 2009, 2010, right at the launch.
Right at the beginning.
Yeah. So I started a Twitter page. I come up with this handle, Move the Sticks, which is kind of based off of something that Phil Savage used to always talk about. He used to say in scouting, you have so many players you need to watch and so much to do during the course of the year. You got to be self-disciplined. If you just continue to advance the ball, if you just advance the ball and get first downs every day, in other words, just do a little bit of work every day. Don't go by where you don't make some progress on what you're trying to get done. So I kind of adapted, okay, let's talk about getting a first down and just kind of being steady with your work and being dependable. And I thought, okay, let's go move the sticks. Like, it just, a life philosophy of just continue to move the sticks. What's in front of you, get that accomplished and keep going. So I come up with that handle, and then nobody knows who I am. Nobody's following me on this thing. This is kind of dumb. But then all of a sudden started encouraging his followers to follow me to get input on players that could help him in fantasy football and all that. So he kind of helped get the thing going for me, and kind of built up an audience, which led to a lot of radio interviews, which then eventually led to ESPN, putting me on television and doing a bunch of stuff with them. Ended up doing the draft for them on ESPN News with Dari Noka, which
sure.
I mean, who doesn't watch ESPN News when the draft is on? I mean, you could watch the real broadcast, or you could watch
it's like the halftime show at NFL Network that a few people have had to do over the years. Luckily, I've never been thrown on that. But who's watching that instead of the real halftime show?
Yeah, exactly.
So you get some notoriety, I guess you would say, on Twitter. You go back and you work for the Eagles for a couple of years. I'm just going to fast forward through that process. And then you start working at NFL Network. They find you, and do you remember that first time on air? And were there butterflies like when you're on the playing field?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was different. I mean, the first time I remember, the first time doing the ESPN stuff in between the Eagles, or between the Browns and the Eagles, the first time I'd ever been on television at all was remotely. I was in a studio in Orange County. And so that's even more uncomfortable than being on a set with other human beings. I'm trying to look into this camera. I thought it was okay. I went and watched it later that day. My eyes are darting all over the place. I look like a lunatic. So I'm like, well, that was it. I'm one and done on that. They'll never use me again. I look like a psychopath. But they called me and gave me some feedback and some pointers. Then it brought me back. I got a little more comfortable. Then with NFL Network, I think the first thing I did there, I was on with Rich Eisen. It was during Training Camp Live. And he didn't know me from Adam, so I just sat in there. I'm like, gosh, Rich Eisen here, what am I doing? And just tried to fake my way through it. And you get kind of more comfortable as you go along, and the opportunities grew. But I think like most of us, I had no idea what I was doing.
I have enjoyed watching your rise throughout the media ranks, and one of my best friends in the business, and this is a guy who has earned everything he has. And DJ, before we let you go, I just got to throw out a couple quick hitters.
Yeah.
Okay. The show that you have binge watched during quarantine, not that you've had a lot of extra time, but at some point you got to have a couple of free hours. Is there a show or shows that you'll watch before you go to bed at night?
It's funny you say that, because every single night, my youngest son, Hayden, and I, our tradition that we've started during this quarantine is I get all my work done. He's doing, schoolwork on the computer, which he can do anytime during the day. So he can stay up late and sleep in and get his work done. So we watch probably 2 episodes of Brooklyn Nine-Nine before we go to bed every single night. And Andy Samberg it's just what I need at the end of the day to kind of unwind. It's loose. You don't have to really pay attention. It's got some good one-liners. It's just a good show. So that's been my go-to.
Yeah, my son, who's 12, he loves to watch Impractical Jokers or any comedy out there. And I've already done Ozark, the Tiger King. I'm getting through Peaky Blinders. And one recommendation, DJ. Yeah. It might be definitely, it's not a kid one, but Yellowstone. It's on the Paramount Network.
Okay.
Costner, excellent TV show.
All right. Once the draft gets done, I've got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, you'll have much more time than you do now. First thing you're going to do when the draft is over is what?
I was thinking about jumping in the pool, because I'm never going to have another draft where I do the draft from my home office. So I thought, why not just give one of the kids well, they have their phones. They don't need mine, but just say, as soon as it sign off, whatever I have to do, my last duties there on the draft, sign off, just take the jacket off, and then just go cannonball into the pool. Because I'm never going to get to do that again.
That's brilliant. No, you have to do that. You have to take advantage of this opportunity. And finally, before we let you go, it's been out there that you've been contacted by teams over the years. At some point, many have said, and I do believe that you're going to be an NFL general manager at some point, whenever that time comes. You're obviously going to be ready for it. But family is number one. I mean, the only person who involved in the NFL that has more kids than you is probably Phillip Rivers. I know the timing has to be right. But how many times a year does a friend with an NFL front office, approach you and say, hey, what do you think? Come join us.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, loose conversations, nothing concrete, but the idea, probably comes up a couple times a year with buddies. Would you,
Yeah.
any more thought about this? Would you consider it? And this isn't for general managers' jobs. This is for, joining their group. And it's not, I like where my life is right now. I like being able to go to all my kids' events. Hopefully the events come back with the way the world is right now. But I enjoy getting a chance to be at all that stuff. So I get a chance to stay in the football world. But it doesn't cost me the opportunities to see the kids grow up. So maybe down the line, I would never close the door on that stuff, but not in the immediate future.
Still a young fella, plenty of time for DJ to get back into a football front office. Daniel Jeremiah, lead draft analyst for NFL Network. You can see him each and every day leading up to the draft. And then Thursday, 8 o'clock, that's when the first round starts. ESPN, NFL Network. It's the Jets and the Sharks. Everybody's getting together. It's going to be one heck of a broadcast, the most watched NFL draft in history. The numbers are going to be huge. DJ, enjoy it, my friend. I know you've been grinding all the way through, and all the hard work is going to pay off on those 3 days of the draft. I look forward to watching you, man.
I appreciate you, bud. I appreciate your friendship, and it was a lot of fun to catch up.
Awesome. Talk soon. Good luck.